The payroll module is one of the keys to the growth of your location. The principle at work that forms the core of this value is that people do what they are paid to do. More specific job requirement equals more specific pay schedule. More specific pay schedule equals more time spent running payroll. Managing payroll efficiently will contribute greatly to growth for many reasons. For example, for any location that has a significant payroll concern, the payroll module drastically reduces administrative overhead. It is well demonstrated that the less time you spend on administrative work, the more time your location can spend on the important work of patient care and business growth. The payroller. Typically, when we run payroll manually, a member of staff will compile a list of hours and submit this information to the person that runs payroll. We'll call this person the payroller. One of the payroller's responsibilities to the location is to verify these submissions to ensure the submitter is not claiming more work than they truly contributed. Once verified, any additional payroll formulas are applied to what is submitted, and the amount is paid for the payroll interval. The verification process. We must consider, what is the verification process? If the submitter is a service provider, is the payroller comparing the submission to reports of bookings? This is the method in many cases. In others, it's also performed by comparison with reports of services rendered. This type of verification takes some time. For example, if a provider works 10 days in a week and has 16 bookings per day, that's 160 bookings to verify. At 2 seconds each, that adds up to 5 minutes every 2 weeks. Say 10 minutes per month for each service provider. With 8 providers, that's a minimum of 80 minutes per month. We know this is only a minimum, of course, because it doesn't include the time the payroller will spend collecting submissions from providers, discussions with providers when questions arise, posed by either the provider or payroller, through the verification process. There's also time used for double-checking, revision, and resubmission of data by providers. In reality, even the smaller locations where pay schedules are not hourly, running payroll requires several hours per month. Payroll formulas. Why so complicated? Fee-for-service pay schedules. We know that most providers, in order to perform well and to appreciate the value of the work they do, need to be paid on a fee-for-service basis. The verification process for their submissions is, in this case, typically a comparison with reports of services billed. When this is the process, the pay formulas are usually quite simple, just a percentage of amounts billed. But it is definitely more complicated than just multiplying hours by hourly rate. Assigned care. With the use of assigned care in a location, there will be far more non-billers that render care. So we can't verify their submissions against service amounts because they didn't bill them. Without any other tools, manually, non-billers need to compile lists of bookings and specify the amount of care that they delivered. The payroller has to verify against reports of bookings and services as if they were the biller, taking note of what portion of the billed amounts the non-biller is responsible for. The fee-for-service and assigned care elements will double or triple the time required to verify submissions. There's simply just more data to read. The patient. Let's say that we want providers to retain patients. How should providers be paid if that's something we want them to do? We would likely want to pay them more for services that are rendered later in the patient's history with the location than for services that were rendered earlier. When we do this, we have to count services and watch for thresholds where the pay rate increases. We have to also remember that there are a multitude of care packages that result in a multitude of ways to pay the provider. Realized value. We noted earlier that people do what they are paid to do. To pay a provider who's not a biller on a fee-for-service basis requires more complicated pay formulas that require time to execute every time payroll is run. The more complicated the formula is, the longer it takes to calculate payroll. The owner's time. The first source of value comes from consideration of who this payroller is. In most cases, This is the owner. The best use of an owner's time is not comparing lists of bookings and services and pushing numbers from one end of the desk to the other. The best use of an owner's time is generating and building business, which menial administrative work does not accomplish. Complicated formulas. We've said that more complicated pay formulas are necessary to get ideal performance from a service provider and for a service provider to get good feedback about the value they're contributing to the practice. How complicated are these formulas? The most effective formulas can be quite complicated. Providers need to monitor their own performance. If business is to grow, the people that make that growth happen need to know how they're doing. If they can't quickly figure out how they're doing, they won't know that they should or should not change anything about their work, let alone think of what's to change. Payroll. Why we need to get it right. A provider will see many patients in a month, and there will be more than one provider in a location. If it takes an hour to calculate payroll for each provider, the time overhead for generating payroll adds up quickly because it's important to get it right. We can't underpay if we hope to retain staff or overpay if we hope to run a viable practice. In conclusion, automated payroll is valuable because it's efficient. At the very least, automation will save you time. It is accurate. It avoids human transcription errors. We need to take advantage of a machine's work by having it produce consistent, accurate information. It is fair. When we put efficiency and accuracy together, we derive fairness. Fairness to the service provider in that there is no underpayment for their contribution, and fairness to the practice so that there is no overpayment. When everybody is less focused on getting the numbers right and getting them out promptly, they can focus on what the right pay schedule is all about. Motivation. Motivation for what? For growth. Less administrative overhead means everybody gets to spend more time on the important work of delivering care and growing a practice.